So let's fast forward a little bit to Jeff Feinberg. So I met Jeff Feinberg, and like, I kind of suspected, I'll be honest, I kind of suspected there was something suspicious going on with him from the very beginning. He was a little too friendly. And so um, turns out that Kim and Jeff ended up at Cal State East Bay or Cal State Hayward together, and I'm sure there was something more than just them being there together going on. And Cal State East Bay or Cal State Hayward is right down the street, like a 2-minute drive or a 1.5-minute drive from where my Red Book Republican felons, George Herbert and Scotch Ferry or Lee Thompson Herbert live. And then at some point, we'll fast forward a little bit, after one of my surgeries with my orthopedic surgeon, I ended up at physical therapy at San Jose Physical Therapy, and the quote-unquote physical therapist, who obviously is a fake physical therapist, he lives in Hayward, about a minute or two drive from my Red Book Republican felons, George Herbert and Scotch Ferry or Lee Thompson Herbert, and he worked at a shoe store in Berkeley as well. His name was Bernardo, I think. But anyway, so it was very easy for all of them to, plan illegal activity against me. So, I do know that none of those people were ever my friend or really honest with me about anything. I guess it was one of those, like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer types of thing. And, I had gone to the Feinberg's house in the Los Angeles area, Granada Hills, more than once for like Hanukkah and Passover. And, at one point, his dad, the dad of Jeff Feinberg, looked at me and said something to the effect of, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And I was just shocked. And it turns out that the dad of Jeff Feinberg was a Republican. I think he passed away at this point. And he co-owned a life insurance company with NFL New York Giant Tony. And I met Tony a couple times, more than a couple times. And I met his mother, and Tony was gigantic to me, and his mother was about my size or a couple inches shorter, like very tiny. So that was an interesting dynamic. And yeah, so there's more, of course. So it turns out that the uncle of Ryan Tolner, my friend from childhood, went to the same law school as Jeff Feinberg. And, so there's your connection there. Plus there's the NFL connection. In addition, so then there's Mike Hess, if that's even his real name, and his sister went to UC Davis, and his brother went to UC Davis, and his brother's an attorney, and his brother is definitely a Republican, and of course Mike's definitely a Republican, or whatever his real name is. So Mike had, I guess, a professor friend or whatever that showed up at the Maximum Integrated Products picnic that I was at. And his wife, who has now passed away, attended the same law school as Jeff Feinberg and Bruce Tolner. And that guy that was at the Maximum Integrated Products picnic is a professor at San Jose State. I think he's probably in his 80s now. Yeah, so then, okay, let's circle back here. So then there's Kathy, who is this like really redheaded bartender at the Olive Garden, Palo Alto, California. Kathy was also an escort, it turns out, or courtesan, or whatever you want to call it. And she was the meth hookup for Mike House. And yes, I did see the meth that Mike was using. Mike showed it to me, and he said he only used it to get through projects, which isn't quite true. That's putting it mildly. But so anyway, Kathy was friends with a girl that worked for Pink Cadillac Company, the Pink Cadillac Makeup Company, and she was attending Mills Peninsula College, where the grandfather of the myredbook.com mob, Herbert Felons, was a chemistry professor. And so, yeah, there's your connection back to the Herberts, and of course the meth that Mike was using that he got from Kathy came from the mob Herbert family. Yeah, and then, I'll just keep circling back here. I had to see a psychiatrist for a while, a child psychiatrist, after the traumatic brain injury. And let's see if I can remember his name. Starts with an F. I can't think right now, but eventually I was released from his care, and they look for changes in personality and whatnot after traumatic brain injury. His son, the psychiatrist's son, and the psychiatrist was a Stanford person. So the psychiatrist's son was brought up on charges of forging prescriptions and selling prescription drugs from Mexico. And so, of course, there's that connection too between the myredbook.com Republican mob Herbert family and that child psychiatrist and the son there. Okay, then let's see. There's Hinckley, Memo or Bill Hinckley. So Memo or Bill Hinckley, when I met him, that was in La Jolla, California, near UC San Diego. And he told me that his father was a psychologist. And then there was somebody that showed up at Bird Rock Avenue that turns out it wasn't his dad, but was probably about 40 at the time, 45, 50, I don't know. And I was 17. And whoever that guy was like, Richard's a total jerk and you don't need to be with him and you should get rid of him and so on and so forth. And Bill or Memo told me that was his dad. Well, that wasn't his dad. His dad's an author, and his parents went to Stanford, just like my mother. So that whole La Jolla thing was a total setup. And then when I kind of decided, more like I was pressured into going to UC Davis. One of the Cosby actors, whose name I can't remember at this point, came to take a look at the Bird Rock Avenue property. And I'm just so tired that I can't think of his name. Malcolm Jamal Warner. And of course, the place was a mess because the myredbook.com mob Republican Herbert family house was a pigsty. It was like a hoarder house and then some. And I don't believe in women being barefoot and pregnant and, cleaning and cooking. So, I'm not going to take on that responsibility. And I'm sorry if that makes people angry, but that's just the way I am. And when Malcolm Jamal Warner came to take a look at the place, I remember I was wearing a pair of coveralls from the Gap and a crop top because it's hot in La Jolla sometimes. And I probably weighed 100 pounds, and Richard, who weighed 450 or 500 pounds or whatever, and was 6'5", he came over to me and he grabbed my side, and while Malcolm Jamal Warner was there, and was like, "Oh, I can pinch an inch, ha 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 ha," and like, the entire time in La Jolla, like, Richard kept telling me that it was my responsibility to have sex with him, even though I didn't want to have sex with him, and that's what you're supposed to do when you live together, and like, that's what people expect, so on and so forth. My parents were paying half the rent, so yeah, no, I don't think so. um yeah, so this whole situation goes back years and years and years and years and years and years.